Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of How I Teach with the Language Arts Lady. I'm Donna Reish, your hostess and your teacher. I have been doing some episodes about Twice Told Tales recently and how to teach story writing through piggybacking or through retelling a familiar story with the student's own twist and things like that. So those were the previous episodes 22 and 23. And in those episodes, I did not do the dialogue lessons on here anyway. I do them with my students, but I didn't do them on here because they're long and it takes a lot longer to do those. But I did tell you that when you expect something from your students, they need to be equipped. So it's up to us to teach those skills to them. So I promised you some quotation lessons coming up. So that is what we're going to do today. So let me just do our little bit of housekeeping. First of all, this that I have open right now is your How I Teach Teacher's Notebook episode sheets. That's a mouthful, but you can get free weekly notebooking sheets for you as a teacher each week. And these notebooking sheets almost always have lessons that you can use with your students. So I teach you how to teach it, and then you can use your teacher's notebook to the lesson parts to print off and use with your students. So that is exciting and free to you every single week. And so you have two ways to consume How I Teach. You can listen to it on your favorite podcast app. And if you do listen, I hope that you will print off your teacher's episode sheets ahead of time so that you have those in front of you while you listen and you can be following along. The other way that you can consume this broadcast is through video. And so you can do that at YouTube or at languageartsladyblog.com. And with that, you have the PowerPoint version of the teacher's notebook. So either way, you're going to be able to either look in your teacher's notebook and follow along or watch the PowerPoint um, um, presentation while I teach. So it's a very visual um, program, very visual broadcast. And so it's really difficult for me to teach how I teach in audio only. So that is why we have the teacher's notebook episode sheets, and we also have the PowerPoint video that I teach from. So either way is great, and you can do one or both or either. And either way, also be sure you get your teacher's episode sheets. So this is what we have today for the teacher's episode sheets. And you can see that you get some lessons here about quotations and so forth that you're going to want to hop on and get. Okay, so without further ado, let me go ahead and start the PowerPoint. I'm going to hop around a little bit today, but let's go. So here we go. This episode comes from Write for a Month Fairy Tales 4. So if you remember from previous episodes, my month-long books are called Write for a Month. Very on the nose, right? And we have Write for a Month Fairy Tales, Write for a Month Dumbo, Write for a Month Beauty and the Beast, Write for a Month Peter Pan, Mowgli, Christmas Friends, Dumbo, Slinky Dog, Tools and Tricks. We have, I believe, 40 books in all that will eventually be up at Teachers Pay Teachers, as well as Language Arts Lady store. So this lesson came from Write for a Month Fairy Tales 4. And level 4 means that it is an 8th, 9th, 10th, maybe 11th grade level book. All right. And usually I teach like, this is how I teach this kind of essay, or this is how I teach this kind of story, or this is how I teach this kind of research report. But today I'm going to just focus on quotation inclusion and give you some tips on how to teach quotes to your students from junior high and high school and up. So, and I'm going to use Fairy Tales 4 to do this. All right, so before I do that though, and I didn't think about this, and I'm sorry about that, but before I do this, I'm going to open up a PDF to show you, let me, going to pause it for a minute here. Okay, so before I do that and I start on this lesson for 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th graders, I got to thinking, you know how I keep talking about incrementality and I keep talking about how students have to have the skills that we're asking them to do in whatever project that we're giving them to do, whatever writing we're giving them to write. They have to have the skills for that. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give you a quick glance, and this is not in your teacher's notebook because I just decided this at the last minute, and I didn't give it to my assistant yet. But I just wanted you to see that where I'm starting today with 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade students, learning how to put a quote into an essay and how to informally cite. That's what today is going to be about. It's not going to be research-based, MLA, and all of that. We definitely do that. I have a whole course on that. I have a whole book on that, and I have many, many projects in the Write for a Month level 5s that do that. But to show you, this is where we start with students who've already been introduced to quotations. They've already done the basic work of learning quotations. And so we start with simple quotes in level 2, which is 4th and 5th grade, and of the Write for a Month, and 4-1 of Meaningful Comp, which is my full semester composition book. That set. So we start at 4-1. So we basically start 4th grade or so with quotations. Now, prior to that, I don't put a lot of quotes in the text that they're writing from, their source material that I give them, right? Because I've used programs before. Actually, I used a 3rd grade program that had a split quote that the student was supposed to copy from and then take dictation from. And that was the first problem, was that a 3rd grader doesn't know how to copy quotes and then take dictation, especially because then you're asking them in dictation, you're asking them to apply the rules of whatever fell in their passage that they're dictating from. That's the first problem. The second problem is that it was a split quote, which is really upper level, 10th, 11th, 12th. I mean, sometimes I do it with my 8th and 9th graders, but only if I'm there to fix it for them, because I'm there to help them every step of the way, right? And then the third problem was that it was punctuated incorrectly. So at any rate, I say all that to say that quotation teaching is very, very incremental. So what we're going to go over today in this essay was preceded by these pages that I just want to show you very quickly. This was from Christmas Friends, level 3. So this would be 6th, 7th, and 8th. And they are very basic rules, right? And we use a passage and then we use quote boxes like you're seeing here to teach very, very basic quotation rules. And then we start out here, basic quote with speech tag at the beginning, basic quote with speech tag at the end. The speech tag, that would be the words that show who's speaking. They're called different things in different handbooks and programs, but we call them speech tags because they tag the speaker, right? And then they have a question quote with a speech tag at the beginning. You can see all the details there. We are walking through, we're highlighting, we're making margin notes. We are going through this together, this whole quote box, each one, and then a question quote with speech tag at the end. So they are not, today's lesson is not their first rodeo, right? It is not their first introduction to quotes. As a matter of fact, in their level 2, that's 4th and 5th grade, they are going to put one quote in one of their paragraphs. And it's so I would have these first 2 boxes, just this very, very, very simple quotation lesson. So I'm going to go back into the PowerPoint now and talk specifically about how to do quotation inclusion for an essay in these upper levels. So we're talking about, again, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, somewhere in there. I have remediation books called Jumpstart 1 and Jumpstart 2, and those actually can take your student through 3 years of writing in one semester if they are like, you know, eighth graders and they write at a fourth grade level or something like that. And it goes a little faster. But when it comes to the expectations for the regular Write for a Month books and the non-remediation books, this is an eighth, ninth, 10th grade book. And the expectations for their quotes will be commensurate with that. And it will also, the expectations for their quotes will also will coincide with their previous quotation experience, right? So we don't just say, you know, okay, guys, here's your overview box. This tells you my expectations of you. You are going to write at least one quote. So, okay, put a quote in. All right. You know how much I hate that, right? That is a writing idea. That is a writing prompt. Now, there is a place for writing prompts, like in, say, persuasive writing, or, you know, read this and then put your opinion right there, but not a writing idea. A writing idea is not a lesson, right? A writing idea is not going to get your students to write an essay such as this one, 3 Ways Fairy Tales Help Kids. Okay. So I'm showing you the overview box here because you can see that in this project, which is a 2-week project, it's called Projects 1 and 2. It's called 3 Ways Fairy Tales Help Kids. And they are going to, you can see Roman numeral 1, topic of essay. They're going to write 3 Ways Fairy Tales Help Kids. And there are some examples there: imagination, character, creativity, understanding the world, fun. They can choose 3 of those, or they can choose 3 other ones, or 3 of their own, or they can choose a couple of those and 1 of their own. In Roman numeral 2, they're going to write 3 paragraphs for the body. In Roman numeral 3, they're going to write 6 to 8 sentences. If they're basic students, that would be, you know, just coming into level 4, or less experienced. And they're going to write 7 to 10 sentences in each paragraph if they are experienced. Everybody's going to write an opening. Everybody's going to write a closing. They do not have to cite sources, but they have to use sources to find their information. So they do not have like an MLA or an APA citation lesson in this. This is more persuasive, expository, exposing your reader to information. And then quotations are assigned. All right. So that is what this project entails. So they know right off the bat, again, the expectation, explanations, they know exactly what's going to be expected of them. Okay. And I've talked about this before, how this is a really, you know, detailed expectation explanation. Yes, it really is very detailed. But my kids put a sticky note on the top. They can come back in. I hear them all the time. You know, how many sentences do we have to have? And they flip back. It's Roman numeral 3, 6 to 8 per paragraph for basic. Oh, your extension, you have to do 7 to 10. You know, I mean, it's right before them all the time. Okay, so they never have to worry. But that is not what this lesson's about. All right, so you know that I always teach from samples, right? So this is one that my writing assistant, Zachary, has written. And it has an opening paragraph, which is the history of fairy tales. And I have to preface this with this too. They have already had 5 opening paragraph types by this time. They have had a quotation opening. They have had a story opening. They have had an informative opening, such as this, History of Fairy Tales. They have had a dialogue opening. They have had a definition opening. I've already taught them all the different kinds of openers that they might want to use in an essay. Okay. And Zach chose the informative one, which is the History of Fairy Tales, which is absolutely amazing. It's a great idea. And teaching from this, so if you have the teacher's notebook, you'll see it's all on 2 pages. It's kind of broken up on the slides, but here is the opening paragraph. There's paragraph of body A, constructive ideas for imaginative play. POB B, power of ordinary people. POB C, showing how good conquers evil. And then the closing paragraph is a definition. So he's defining the words fairy tale. All right. And again, we've already learned how to do those paragraphs. All right. Those openings and closings. And then I teach from this. So all of that highlighting and the underlining and all that, I would use that, and maybe I can teach this essay sometime. I think it has a lot of great ideas in it, but great tools for teachers to learn how to teach writing from. But for our purposes here, I'm not so much looking at, okay, there's the thesis statement, there's the opening paragraph, there's POBA, there's a transition, there's another transition, POBB, there's POBC, there's another transition, there's closing paragraph, there's another thesis, it's a thesis statement reloaded. I'm not so much looking at that as I am the quotations. So we would come in here when I'm teaching this project, I would teach the project, how they're going to do this project. I would use the lesson that is not here for you today because it's too much information, but I would use, they have a directed brainstorming box, just like you've seen. I believe that was, I think I've had them several times in these episodes prior to 24 here. And they choose their first way that fairy tales help kids, their second way, their third way. They list them, they go find information, they outline, and so on and so forth. And then I'm going to say, don't forget, you have to have at least one quote. So after I've taught them how to get their information and how to organize it, because that is always one of the problems with students is they don't know how to organize information. The three ways of something is a very simple essay approach. If you remember in episode number 1, all the way back earlier in 2021, I taught writing the 3 favorites essay from Peter Pan 3 and said, 3 favorites, one of the best essays to teach. It's in their brain. They know there are 3 favorites. They're going to say, my first favorite ice cream is chocolate chip. My second favorite ice cream is butter pecan. My third favorite ice cream is vanilla. Yeah, I'm very plain. And it's going to be just that simple. The first paragraph of the body is going to have chocolate chip. It's not going to have anything about butter pecan because it's only going to have chocolate chip. And the next paragraph is going to be butter pecan. And it's not going to have anything about chocolate chips because that was the previous paragraph, so on and so forth. Simple, simple essay. Go back and watch episode number 1. That is a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade project, but definitely I taught in that episode how to take it down for 3rd and 4th and 5th graders. And you can also, of course, make it more challenging. But this 3 ways is an amazing essay, even for kids who are not really that familiar with persuasive writing. In my persuasive writing book, I think it's Meaningful Composition 10-1. I'm teaching it starting next week, actually, this year. And I teach the 3 P's of persuasion: your position, your points, and your proofs. You don't have to be able to do any of that for kids to write this essay. So you can see how it's such an amazing stepping stone, because who can't come up with 3 ways, right? And who can't find information about those 3 ways? And who can't put one way in one paragraph, another way in the next paragraph, another way in the next paragraph? You see how easily broken down this is. But I am getting back onto the essay and not on the quote. So what I'm really going to do today with you is look here in the opening paragraph. There are no quotes. Okay, so I'm going to go on to POBA, and there are no quotes there. And again, I would read this, we'd read it out loud, we would highlight, we draw arrows to the margin, make sure that all the reasons, all the ways are in order and all that kind of thing. Okay, so let's go to POBB, and I don't see a quote there. Remember, they have to put one quote anywhere in their paper. Okay, POBC is, I thought there was there's a G.K. Chesterton quote. Okay, so right there in POBC, the paragraph that's in brackets in bold font at the end of POBC, showing how good conquers evil. Okay, right smack dab in the middle, there's a quote that goes like this: as G.K. Chesterton observed, comma, quote, capital F, because we always start quotes with capital letters, fairy tales do not tell children that dragons exist. Children already know that dragons exist. Fairy tales tell children that dragons can be killed. Period. Quote. All right. So when I am teaching and beginning this quotation lesson, we come along here, we find that quote, We circle it with the highlighter, the whole thing. We draw an arrow to the margin, put a star there, and then we come back and we say, okay, box the speech tag as G.K. Chesterton observed. Okay, with another color, highlight the comma after observed. Your opening speech tags have to have commas. Keep in mind they've already had the lower level quotation lessons, right? Those boxes that I showed you at the beginning from a fourth and fifth grade, I think it was a fourth and fifth grade lesson. All right, so then now with another color, highlight the quote capital F, fairy tales. All right, so quotations that have, well, any quotation, unless it has ellipsis, which we're not dealing with right yet here, this level, quotation F, quotations begin with a capital letter. Okay, so depending on their level and how, experienced they are with quotes, we might draw an arrow to the margin and write in the margin, all quotes start with cap. Might do something like that from there. We may not. It just depends on their experience, right? Then we come along and I point out to them how there are 3 sentences of quotes. And when you have one person saying 3 sentences of a quote, you do not start it over again. You don't, like fairy tales do not tell children that dragons exist, period, quote. Chesterton also said, quote, children already know that dragons exist, period, quote. Quote, fairy tales do not tell children that dragons exist, comma, quote, said G.K. Chesterton, right? When you have one person saying 3 sentences or however many sentences of information, you put a quote at the beginning, a capital letter, all the sentences that that person spoke, and then look at the end here, guys. Period, quote, highlight, arrow to the margin. Periods always go inside quotation marks in the US. And we write always in all caps. It's the one rule that they can be sure of in English. There are very, very few rules that are always true. And commas and periods always inside quotation marks in the United States is one of them. So we make a big deal out of it because it's like, kids, I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy we have a rule today that is always the same. Yay. It's a big deal. All right. So then there's also a quote in the last one. Now, he only has to have, one quote, but he has another one. And so we would do the same thing with that definition from Merriam-Webster, since the closing is a definition paragraph. All right, so then we're going to go to some quote boxes and we are going to talk about how they are going to put their quote in their essay. All right, they have assigned one quote. So if you are in your teacher's notebook, I am at C1. Okay, C1. Study the quote boxes provided to learn how to include basic quotations in your outline, then in the body of your essay. All right, so there is a lot of debate, right? And students will tell you, I'm just going to write quote, and I'm going to remember where it is, and then I'm going to put it in my essay when it says quote. All right. Okay, there are a couple things going on here. They're so conniving sometimes, but wonderful. So we're just going to direct them into the right path. All right, so you can't count on anything being the same on the internet today as it is tomorrow, or as it will be an hour from now. So I tell them that I want their quote in their outline. And when I grade their outline, if they write the word quote in big letters and they haven't stapled the quote to their paper or something, to their outline, or paper clipped it, or written it in the margin, or written it on a sticky note and stuck it onto there, then they get a lower score. Okay, so they know that my expectations are that your quote will be in your outline, so it's ready for you. All right, so you're not going to go get it later. You might not be able to find it. We're going to put it in your outline. All right. Also, at this level, especially 10th, 11th, 12th grade, you are going to put your quote in your outline while you are thinking. So when we divide up the writing process into, thinking, researching, outlining as one piece, and then writing as another, and then of course editing as another. So just take those 3 pieces, for example. We are in the thinking stage here. And I tell them that I want them to put a quote in their paper because it is needed in order to make your point. It is needed in order to understand your point better, in order to explain your your reason in that paragraph better. It is needed to make your point better. And unlike when they were in elementary school, fourth, fifth, and maybe middle school, sixth, maybe up to seventh, when I let them come back later and stick a quote in somewhere as an exercise in quotation use, at this point in their studies, they should know that a quote is needed here. So when my high schoolers, especially my upper level high schoolers, tell me I'm going to add my quote later, I'm like, no, you're not going to add your quote later, because you're putting your quote in during the thinking part of your writing. You're putting your quote in because it's needed. If you put one in later, you're sticking it in just because I'm making you put a quote in. That's not the same as putting it in because it flows in your paper or because it is needed as part of your thinking skill. Okay, so yeah, a few things to work through sometimes, because especially kids who haven't been with me for a while, they're not used to some of the non compromises, non discussions. This is just how we do it, right? And students who've been with me for a while, they know, yep, this is what I have to do. She's not going to like it. I even hear them saying, you where's your quote? Did you put your quote in? Like when they're getting into class, what quote did you put in? Oh, I got it off the internet. I just wrote quote right there. And then another one says, you're not going to get a good score. She wants your quote in your outline. I mean, I can hear it. They are used to my expectations, right? And again, that's upper level, so there might be some leeway here for seventh and eighth graders. All right, so here I'm telling them how to put their quotes in. Now, this is a lot of confusion for students, and that is they say, well, I couldn't find any quotes about this topic. I couldn't find any quotes that went with this, because they, in their mind, think that they need to get a quote out of a source that has quotation marks around it that is already a quote. And this is where, and actually I teach this from early on. I tell my little people, you have two choices for your quote. Okay, you're going to get one quote. This was in the Mowgli research. Where was that? Let me see here. Mowgli. Yep, nope, that's short story. Oh, it was a research report with Mowgli. Okay, there it is. Episode 4. Okay. In episode 4, they had to go get a quote for one animal of the jungle. Okay. And they're like, well, I can't find a quote about um, a leopard's eating habits or whatever it might be. And so even for my little people, I tell them you have two choices for your quotes. You can get it out of a book or an online source that already has quotation marks around it. And then you just put it in your paper just like it falls. And that is called a people quote. That's what I call that. I call that a people quote. So they have two choices. They can do a people quote or they can do a book quote. Okay. That's a little bit, it's not perfect because book quotes can also be people quotes. But the key to this, and I have them highlight already quoted in their source. Arrow to the margin already has quotation marks. All right. And that is their people quote. So it means that somebody said it. In this case, G.K. Chesterton said that example of A here in people quote. And in B, Hans Christian Andersen said it. Okay. So I tell them you're going to put your quote on your outlining lines, or you're going to put it on a sticky note, or you're going to print it off and attach it to your outline. And you have a choice between a people quote like that or a book quote. And then I have them highlight, this is also called lifted text. So when they're in research reports and upper levels, we call it lifted text. So it's lifted out of their book and they put quotation marks around it, or it's lifted out of an online article or out of an online encyclopedia or whatever it might be. It's lifted and then you make it into a quote. And so this relieves some of the pressure from students feeling like they have to find a quote that's already quoted. Say, you can make a quote. Okay. So they have two choices, their people quote or their lifted text, not already quoted. So we highlight not already quoted, we circle not, we draw an arrow to the margin, make a sentence into a quote, right? And so they have these two choices. Again, without sounding like a broken record, they have done a lot of quotation work leading up to this point, right? Because keep in mind, how do I teach all usage in my writing books? I teach all usage as it is needed for that project, right? So they already had, like in that Mowgli one, episode 4, one jungle animal, they already had to put one quote in to one of their 3 paragraphs about their characteristics of an animal of the jungle. So, and I held their hand the whole way through that. And I put the quotes on the board and I had them bring me in their quote and I put their punctuation in right for them. And they know that I'm going to help them. And they know that I'm going to be there for them because I'm not going to give them anything to do that I don't prepare them for. I'm not going to have any expectation of them that I haven't given them the tools for. I know I sound like a broken record, but how many writing programs and writing books do we have that either have writing ideas, or you know what I think about that, or they have an assignment and they don't give the tools. They don't know how, the student doesn't know how to make the transitions from one paragraph to another. They do not know how to decide what goes in each paragraph. They do not know how to put the quote in, but they're supposed to put a quote in, right? They do not know how to do 5 types of openings. They do not know how to do 5 types of closings, right? And so my goal is to make these projects as easy as possible for students. So here we have their book quote. And I tell them that this comes from a site called Learning Through Literature, and the article is called, and I've already taught them minor works and major works too by this time. So they know Learning Through Literature is a major. And I even say to them, guys, look at Learning Through Literature. It's underlined. Does that mean it's a major or a minor? It's a major, right? Major works are either underlined or italicized. Good job. All right, so then what about this quote, 5 reasons fairy tales are good for children? It's got quotation marks around it. It must be an article. Yes, it's a minor work, right? Okay, so I tell them they're going to get into this site called Learning Through Literature. They're going to go to this article called 5 reasons fairy tales are good for children. They're going to take a sentence out of there. They're going to put it in their paper and they are going to put quotation marks around it. All right. And they are going to put the quote word for word, right? I tell them that anytime you use something word for word, you have to have quotation marks around it. You have to explain, you have to have the quote exactly like it is. So they took these words. The simplicity of good overcoming evil is deeply reassuring to a child struggling to make sense of the wide world around them. So maybe this goes in their paragraph called Fairy Tales Teach Children That Good Overcomes Evil. So they take it out of this article and they put quotation marks around it. So it's lifted text. It's not already quoted in the source. You're going to make it into a quote. This relieves a lot of the pressure to students because they can get a quote that's already quoted, or they can just get a sentence of information from an expert, such as an article about 5 reasons fairy tales are good for children from a reputable site, and they can make it into a quote. All right. So then we have more lessons on beginning speech tags and ending speech tags. And this is in your, because this was putting in their outline, right? They're going to put that in their outline. And then this is their like condensed lesson, beginning speech tag and ending speech tag. Now, this is all prior to dialogue writing. Remember, I told you last week in episodes 22 and 23, the last couple of weeks in the Twice Told Tale, that I was going to get to dialogue writing. You don't really jump from no quotation experience to dialogue. I'm just saying that right now, right? And that's why kids do not know how to write dialogue, and they just, have these paragraphs that go on and on and on, and their quotations are just kind of, all over the place, because they haven't learned the basic rules for quotation writing. So here we have the beginning speech tag and the details of that rule with the Helen Keller quote, and we have the ending speech tag with the details of that quote. Again, this is where we're going to walk through the punctuation, and we're going to use a highlighter. Helen Keller said, opening speech tag, comma. Always put a comma following opening speech tags. Yes, I know you can sometimes put a colon, but they're not ready for that yet. That is in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Okay, when they realize that you can put a colon following a speech tag that is a complete sentence. Okay, that's another lesson for another day for older, more experienced students. Right, so I just tell them, you put a comma, because it won't be wrong if they put a comma, even if a colon would work, but it will be wrong if they put a colon where only a comma is needed. It's like you can't put Helen Keller said colon, right? Because Helen Keller said is not a complete sentence. That's another rule for another day. But I tell them, put a comma. You're not going to go wrong with the comma. All right. So Helen Keller said, comma. All right. We always put a comma after beginning speech tags. We highlight the quote, capital A. Quotations begin with a capital letter at the end, period, quote. In the US, periods always go inside the quotation mark, dot, 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 dot. And we go through these samples. And they've already had all of those little boxes that I showed you for younger kids prior to this. All right, I think I'm over my time again, but I have so much to tell you because I love teaching students how to write. I love teaching grammar. I love teaching usage, vocabulary, editing, checklist challenge. I love teaching all of these things because it equips students for anything in their future, right? There is no way that you can go wrong with strong writing lessons, right? With great writing projects. There's no way that you can go wrong with it because it's going to give them all kinds of things for their future: research, creativity, punctuation, just amazingness. All right, so I'm going to stop here, but I am going to go into dialogue next time. All right, so keep in mind this is 8th, 9th, 10th. Definitely you could do this with an 11th, 12th grader too. This project from this book, Fairy Tales 4. And next week, we're going to dig into dialogue. Okay. And that would be more like what would be in a twice told tale lesson: how to write with people speaking back and forth. Right. And they already have the mechanics, right? They already have the mechanics of punctuation, capitalization, speech tags, and so forth. All right. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget, your teacher's notebook is there at / how I teach. And you can get all 24 episodes of Teacher's Notebooks downloadable and ready to put in your binder. And then you'll have them ready to print off to teach your students because they all contain things that you can teach from. All right, and here are some free products related to this. These all have the potential of having quotations. The checklist challenge usually has a quotation on the upper levels in the projects where they're supposed to add a quote. Those are all free. And they also have videos of me teaching those to students. So as opposed to this where I teach teachers, those freebies all have lessons with me teaching. These are digital products that have quotation marks in them. So you can use this list to choose some of the lower level ones to start with. There are some 2s and 3s. So that would be 4th and 5th, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th. Start with those. Either they have dialogue if they're stories, or they have quotations if they are essays or research reports. But those are all Write for a Month products that are either available at Language Arts Ladies store or at Language Arts Ladies Teachers Pay Teachers. Oh, tons of them. There's a bunch more too. Okay, there are a lot of quotes. I teach quotes a lot. Here are the, oh, wow, there are still more. All right. And here, actually, on the Meaningful Composition page, all Meaningful Composition books from 4-2 all the way through 12-2, and then the Jumpstart 1 and the Jumpstart 2, the remediation books, they all have quotation lessons in them. Okay, so you can't go wrong with one of those if you want a full semester, um, character based, religion based, Christian based. Right for a month are not religion, not Christian based. They're not. There's nothing wrong with them. They're based on stories, and they're wonderful. And then the meaningful compositions are for Christian schools and Christian homeschools. All right, we can create a class. I can teach your students online, and my husband and I are available to hire a teacher for any of your classes that you just want somebody else to do it. Just do this once or twice a week for me for an hour, 45 minutes, so that I don't have to think about it. And he's really, really filling up. I think he has like 30 slots right now of these besides his teaching load. But you can contact us, and if it's something I can do, I might have a slot. He has a few slots, and he does group some kids too for these if you're interested in that. All right, and then we have private tutoring. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to be teaching you how I teach all language arts and writing. Thanks again. See you next week.